Boxy, Boxy, we're live. Hi, everybody. I'm Larry Harnish, and this is Boxy. Boxy is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. And this is the first Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia for 2026. Yes, 2026 already. How is that possible? This session is going to be a lot different. I have got a big story that I need to respond to, so I'm going to do that. But before I get going, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, the anniversary of Elizabeth Short's murder is January 15th. Find a respectful way to remember her. If, the way I do it is I always either trim my roses on January 15th or by January 15th. Okay. But it's a quiet day for me. I do reflect on her life and on the Black Dahlia case. So there will be various occasions on her, on the anniversary of her murder. There will be generally, there'll be a new book. William J. Mann has got a book coming out. It's kind of pegged to the anniversary of the murder. And there's also the Mike Connelly, Zodiac, Black Dahlia stuff that's coming out now. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the death tourism industry will find ways to mark that, whether it's you know who you are, death tourism industry. I'm not going to give them a plug. What this normally is I talk for a little bit. I talk for a little bit and then I take questions and I give a report on the book. I'm doing a book on the Black Dahlia case. I've been researching I am going into my 30th year, which doesn't seem possible on the Black Dahlia case. And it's an incredibly complicated story. It's made even more complicated by stories like that broke recently and that are total nonsense. But anyway, I usually give a report on the book. I think I'm about 180,000 words at this point. And where I am now is I am dealing with the arrest of Red Manley. Okay. So the first part of the book is the life of Elizabeth Short. I have done that in as much detail as possible, as much as we can possibly know about her. And remember, there are entire years of her life that we don't know anything about. We just don't know where she was. So, but anyway, that's what I normally do. This time, however, I'm going to talk specifically about the news stories that you might have seen about the Black Dahlia and Zodiac. Are they solved? No. Are they related? No. Only in the parallel reality of Steve Hodel, who has devoted the last 23 years of his life to establishing his father as one of America's most prolific serial killers. Okay. Only in the world of Steve Hodel are these crimes related. But anyway, who am I? Very quickly, Larry Harnish. I retired from the Los Angeles Times 10 years ago. I was 34 years in daily journalism, 27 at the Los Angeles Times. At the Los Angeles Times, I was primarily a copy editor. I was also a feature writer, blogger, columnist, what have you. I worked with Mike Connelly when he was a reporter. He was a good reporter, for sure. We both worked in the San Fernando Valley edition. So, yeah. So I go way back. I worked many, many years ago with Michael Connelly. So that's kind of who I am. I got involved in the Black Dahlia case in 1996 to write a story about the 50th anniversary of the Black Dahlia case, pegged to January of 1997. And in the preparation of that story, I talked to anybody I could find who was still around. They're gone now. But I interviewed Betty Bersinger, the lady who found the body. I talked to one of the first two police officers on the scene. They didn't move the body, regardless of what Eli Frankel says. No, they didn't move the body. No. I talked to one of the reporters. I listened to tape recordings of people, all that sort of thing. I became pretty good friends with a guy who was a homicide detective at the time. He didn't work the Dahlia case. He was on other stuff, but he definitely knew Jack Donahoe, who was head of homicide, and he knew the two lead detectives, Harry Hansen and Finest Brown. He knew them pretty well. And other detectives, another detective who had been loaned to the investigation and all that kind of thing. So I have all of that. And to kind of complement that, I also interviewed John Douglas, the profiler. Again, this was in 1996. And I will say, just as a prelude for everything that follows, if I were to study the Black Dahlia case now, I would have anybody who starts now is at a tremendous handicap, because so much garbage has been written about the Black Dahlia case since then. You have all these terrible books that have been, they're all bad. Don't read any of them. They're all terrible. But anyway, so that's kind of who I am and what I do. I've started doing, and as part of this, I talk to anybody with a microphone and a camera. You want to talk about the Black Dahlia case? Because I thought it was my obligation. And I should point out, I'm the only reporter who has ever had any contact with Elizabeth Short's family. They don't talk to outsiders. They don't even let outsiders know that they have any link to the Black Dahlia case, because they're all girls. None of them are named Short. So nobody makes the connection. Anyway, let's see. So that's kind of what I have done. But anyway, I talked to anybody with a microphone and a camera for more than 20 years. And then in the last, I think I peg it to Making of a Murderer. True crime has just gotten so sleazy that I don't want any part of it. And I will tell you now, I got an inquiry from Nightline. Hey, will you talk to us? Will you do an interview about the Black Dahlia case? And I told them no. And then I said, will you talk to us on background? And I said, well, okay. And so I talked to them on background. And then I said, they said, will you do an interview with us? And it's like, I was tempted, but you know what? I saw what Inside Edition did with this story. And it's like, I don't want any part of the way TV is going to treat the Zodiac Black Dahlia case. I don't want any part of it, because I know how it's going to be. No. So this is what I do instead of giving interviews. I did give an interview to Chris Goffard of the Los Angeles Times, who wrote the piece on, he did write the piece on Zodiac and the Black Dahlia. And I did give an interview to a podcast called Consult, former FBI profilers. And they're very different. They're very different than most true crime podcasts. As I said, true crime has become just so sleazy, I don't want any part of it. Okay. So that is who I am, how I got involved with the Black Dahlia, and who I've talked to. Now, I should disclose as we get into this. I got a couple of emails a while back. I think it was in December, from Chris Goffard. And I hadn't heard from him in a long time. He said, hey, what about Marvin Margolis? And I said, yeah, Marvin Margolis was investigated and eliminated. In reality, and we'll get more into who Marvin Margolis is later. Marvin Margolis and his roommate, Bill Robinson, shared an apartment with Elizabeth Short and her sidekick, Margie Graham. What happened is Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short were living with a guy named Mark Hansen. He threw them out. Margie and Elizabeth Short were on Hollywood Boulevard. They ran into these two guys, Marvin Margolis and Bill Robinson. And housing was very difficult to get. It was very difficult to get a place to stay in Los Angeles, actually in post-war America, but especially in Hollywood and Los Angeles. And so Robinson and Margolis let Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short stay with them. And presumably, these are two young war veterans. They've got these two young ladies who are looking for a place to stay and sort of, pressed for finances. And I would think that they kind of expected romance from these two ladies, and they didn't get it. We know they didn't get it because they said so. So after 10 days, Bill Robinson, his aunt and uncle ran the apartment building. It's called The Guardian. It's on Hollywood Boulevard, and it's a dump. It's still there. It's nasty. But anyway, his aunt and uncle were running it. And he said, look, my aunt and uncle are going to throw us out if you ladies keep staying here. So you need to move out. And so what happened was Bill Robinson told Margie Graham and Elizabeth Short, you need to leave now. And so they left. And at that point, Margie Graham decided to move. She went back to Massachusetts. She was from Massachusetts, and that's how she knew Elizabeth Short. Margie went back to Massachusetts, and Elizabeth Short decided to stay in California. She wanted to stay in Hollywood. And that's the day that she got picked up by this amateur photographer, Glenn Kearns, and he took her out to John Marshall High School. So when you see the pictures of her at John Marshall High School, that is how she looked on the day that Bill Robinson asked her to move out. Okay, so that's who Margolis and Robinson were. That's why we're even talking about any of this stuff. Okay. Whew. Got it? Okay. What happened recently? Anyway, Goffard emailed me. What about Marvin Margolis? He was picked up. He was eliminated. It says so in the LAPD summary on the case. Yeah, but how do you know? How do you know how he was investigated and eliminated? It says right in the LAPD summary. We picked him up. We interrogated him. We questioned him. We interviewed him, and we eliminated him based on their work schedules. We eliminated Robinson and Margolis. And I said, look, they were eliminated. And Goffard kept going, what about it? What about it? And it's like, no, they were eliminated. How do you not get that they were eliminated? Well, and so, he said, well, I'm working on something. Margolis, he was still, under suspicion. And look, here's the reality of the Black Dahlia case. Elizabeth Short knew she crossed paths with hundreds of people. Okay. We know that about Elizabeth Short. She met tons of people. She never worked in Hollywood. The whole time she was in Los Angeles, she didn't work. So she knocked around Los Angeles. She crossed paths with hundreds of people. And so what the police did, the detectives did, was they treated anybody who knew Elizabeth Short as a suspect who had to be eliminated. So was Margolis a suspect in the sense that everybody was a suspect? Yeah. But I mean, for all intents and purposes, and let me point out that if you were picked up by the LAPD in the 1940s, it wasn't, hey, stop by for a cup of coffee and we can talk. No. That's not how they worked. If they picked you up and wanted to find out something, you were going to get grilled. Okay. And remember, to point this out, this is before Miranda. So yeah, if you were picked up by the LAPD, it wasn't just a chat over a cup of coffee. No. So Goffard says, well, Margolis changed his name. And I said, so? Anyway, and he said, well, and I'll get into more of that about all this supposedly damning evidence about Margolis. No. Anyway, so I finally said, look, you are wasting your time and mine on Marvin Margolis. You are free to waste all the time you want to on Marvin Margolis, but you're wasting my time. I will give the following statement, and that's it. Marvin Margolis was investigated by the LAPD. He and his roommate, Bill Robinson, were picked up by the LAPD. They were interviewed. They were investigated. Done. And so Goffard comes back, well, sloppy police work. And it's like, no, bullshit. Don't give me this sloppy police work, because I hate to say it, but that is on page 1 of the Cold Case Detectives Playbook, is the original investigation was bungled. Not with the Black Dahlia case. I will say this again and again. The Black Dahlia case was state of the art for 1947. It absolutely was. It was an incredible investigation. So don't come at me with sloppy police work. Baloney. So, yeah. So I did talk to Chris. He sent me one more email. I didn't even read it. It's like, you're wasting my time on Margolis. So then the story comes out. And it breaks in the Daily Mail, which is a British paper. And, the Brits will publish anything, When it comes to true crime, the Brit publications are absolutely the worst. They have absolutely no conscience at all. They will say anything. But Chris, the LA Times comes with amateur code breaker, cracks the code that solves, the Black Dahlia and Zodiac. They're related, and it was Marvin Margolis. And, it's people treat the Black Dahlia case like a game of Clue. It's Colonel Mustard in the conservatory with a wrench, Professor Plum in the library with a candlestick, I don't know. Anyway, so, let's unpack all this stuff. Starting with not who Marvin Margolis is, but let's talk about and my head is I'm going to try to keep everything. Let's talk about the amateur code breaker who solved the case, Alex Babber. Ooh, I think we are going to find, and I had help doing research on Mr. Alex Babber of Cold Case Consultants of America. I had help doing research on him. You know who you are. Thank you very much. And I also had help in looking at the whole code breaking NSA guys. I'll have a lot to say to that sort at the end. I'm talking about Babber. I'm going to talk about Margolis, and I'm going to talk about the NSA guys at the end. So if you want to know about code breaking, stick around for the very end of it. And I almost forgot. The next session, I'm switching the Ask Me Anything on George Hodel to the Black Dahlia Book Club. I'm going to talk about things that have been written about the Black Dahlia case. Anyway, so Mr. Alex Babber, we are going to find through research that he is, and I know this will be a shock, he is not a truthful individual. Oh my goodness. A cold case consultant who is not truthful? Okay. Who is this Alex Babber guy anyway? Here we go. And my sources for this are the website of Cold Case Consultants of America. It has been backed up at archive.org. So you can go back and look through the old versions of the website and what it used to say and what it says now. And then there were two TV interviews, or there are two video interviews. Babber got a television station in Chicago to do about a 5-minute segment with him in 2022. And I will put the link in the description so you can watch it and make up your own mind. And then, oh boy, howdy. He did an hour and 20-minute interview with CrimeHQ, also in 2022. Now that, I will put the link up with that, but it's behind a paywall. But you can get in through a 3-day trial subscription, which is how I got in. But it's an 80-minute interview with him, and it is just staggering, the claims that he makes. So and then of course, Chris Goffard's story. And so my first question about Mr. Babber was, he tells Chris Goffard that he grew up in, let's see, let me get it exactly. Diagnosed with autism at 12, Babber said he endured schoolyard beatings throughout his childhood in rural Florida. He got a GED, skipped college, and taught himself cryptography, forensics, and computer science. Now, we are going to find that that's not true. And don't take my word for it. It's on Ancestry.com. Mr. Babber was not born or raised in rural Florida. No. He was born and raised in Ohio, which is pretty far from Florida. He attended Grove City High School. Grove City is apparently a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. But there are, because, thank you, genealogists, we actually have yearbook photos of Mr. Alex Babber, except at that time, he wasn't going by Alex. He was Brian Babber. So you want to search for Brian Babber. But yeah, he's on Ancestry.com. And no, he didn't grow up in rural Florida. Let's see. Then he says, oh, wow. The thing about using the computers to crack Zodiac and the Dahlia, and let me point out, the Black Dahlia case and the Zodiac case have absolutely nothing in common at all, except they occurred in California and they're unsolved. That's it. They're many years apart, many miles apart, totally different methods. They have absolutely nothing in common. Okay. So what Mr. Babber says in this very long CrimeHQ interview is, I got involved in Zodiac in 2007. And that kind of survives in the LA Times version. He saw the David Fincher movie 7. But let me read all of this. I knew David Fincher from his movie 7, which I had went and seen at the theater like 4 times. This is part of my mental capacity. Oh yeah, the other thing about Babber is that he is a autodidact, self-taught, polymath, Asperger's, autistic, different, non-traditional thinking methods. Okay, dude, if that's what you say. Anyway, he says, I like watching things over and over again. So we went and saw this movie and they were talking about these ciphers that were never solved. They cracked and all this. And on the way home, my fiance, she said, look, why don't you take a crack at the cipher? Like, this is your bread and butter. This is what you're good at. I said, no, I'm not interested. So I went home, got comfortable in my recliner, popped it up, turned the TV on. Next thing I know, she had printed it out on the computer and brought me the cipher. Well, 4,527 attempts later that evening, I cracked it and it gave me a name. So he had worked out Zodiac's name, supposedly, way back in 2007. It didn't just happen. No, he had already done this, but there's more. If you want to expose yourself to all of this, go to the CrimeHQ, get a trial subscription. So what Mr. Alex Babber says he does, I don't know if he really did it. He says he does it. He's in 2007 when he got a name for Zodiac, he goes on an online forum, as one would do if you got the name of Zodiac. He went to an online forum and posted the name. And he says, well, everybody's, oh, wow, that's like kind of cool. And he says, you know, that Sunday, my phone rings and he gets a call from somebody who says, what did he say exactly here? I don't want to get this wrong. He's calling me from Las Vegas. And he said, would you like to play a game? And I said, no. And his next phrase kind of moved me. I want to compliment you on cracking my cipher. So at that moment, you know, I hear my neck stood up, the hair on my neck stood up. Yeah, I get that holy moment where, you know, and I called over my fiance and put it on speakerphone so she could hear the conversation. And then he wanted to ask again if I wanted to, you know, play a game. And he went on immediately to give me my name, my first name, my full name, my last name, where I worked, my address, where I lived, my fiance's full name, which her name was Angie, but then he knew her name was Angelique. And so I said, look, I'm done. I'll take it down. So I terminated the call. I reached out to local law enforcement and they laughed at me. They thought it was funny. Good for you, local law enforcement. So that was way back in 2007 that he came up with the name. And so then, after he gets the call from Zodiac, and let me point out, pay attention that he supposedly cracked Zodiac in 4,500 tries, sitting in his recliner and watching television. They put their house up for sale. They sell their house. They go off the grid. Okay, fine. So, but my point was, this was in 2007. When does poor old Marvin Margolis die? 1993. Okay. Marvin Margolus had been dead for 14 years at that point. So if Zodiac called up, Alex, thank you for solving my cipher, that couldn't have been Marvin Margolus because he was effing dead. Okay. Babber's story. I have been laughing all week about this fucking idiot. Babber goes off the grid. Okay. He and his wife at the time, they go off the grid and all of that. And I'm not going to read you the transcript. Let's see. Eventually, I'm leaving out a lot. If you want to expose yourself to his interview, it's on CrimeHQ. He says, yeah, my friends in law enforcement and the FBI and all, of course, because he knows everybody in the FBI and all, they came to me and said, you're so good at this, you need to get back into it. And so he, at that point, founds Cold Case Consultants of America. And he gets some publicity. You still with me? He gets some publicity because he has supposedly, allegedly, compiled one of the, world's largest, whatever, letters of serial killers. Doesn't that sound like a best-selling book? Serial killers letters. Anyway, he gets this letter. He compiles this database of serial killers letters. Now, there was a YouTube interview where these guys were actually saying, where did you get these letters? And it was like, he says he's got all these letters. And there's a lot of double talk about, well, I Weibel-Feats the, syntax, logistic, brainwave patterns, blah, 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 blah. And we ran it through a database, a proprietary database. Sure, dude. And it lit up like a Christmas tree. And we get all these connections to the Black Dahlia. And so he got some publicity with this alleged database on the TV interview in Chicago, which aired in 2022 for the anniversary of Elizabeth Short's birthday. At that point, he was linking the Black Dahlia and Circleville. Oh, yeah. Eventually, in this interview, it's, I spoiler alert, this guy, Babber's guy, is Zodiac, Black Dahlia, Atlanta child murders, and Circleville. It's all the same guy. Yeah. Spoiler. If you want to blow your head up, watch this video because, yeah, they're all the same guy. Anyway, he compiles this database and he links Black Dahlia and the lipstick murders in Chicago. Okay. Then he does, a little bit later, he does this interview with CrimeHQ. And, oh my gosh. So he doesn't, he finally gets it up to, what has he got? So he identifies, he gets a name. And this is all before he went through census records and all that stuff to get Marvin Merrill. He's done all of this with using his handwriting database. But he says that he got a guy, he got a name, and he tracked him from the day he was born until he died and was able to identify him in 106 homicides. No, 107 homicides using this linguistic database of all these letters. Okay. 107 homicides. Black Dahlia, Zodiac, Atlanta child murders, Circleville, the freeway, whatever the hell that was. I can't, and again, you need to know, I only do the Black Dahlia. I'm not a Zodiac guy, okay? I'm not. I'll be the first person to tell you I'm not a Zodiac guy. But when you drag in, when you listen to this interview, it's like, oh my gosh. Well, what does the LA Times say? The LA Times says, to attack the problem, Babber used artificial intelligence and generated a list of 71 million possible 13-letter names. But he already had the name, right? He already had the name in 2007. So why is he what the hell is going on? He uses artificial intelligence and generates a list of 71 million possible 13-letter names using no details of the Zodiac killer, which he had already cracked that code in 2007. Okay, based on witness descriptions, he cross-checked those names against military, marriage, census, and public records. What did he tell CrimeHQ? So I went home, I got comfortable in my recliner, popped it up, turned the TV on. Next thing I know, and then he had 4,527 attempts later, he had cracked the code. What does he tell the LA Times? This takes me 9 months of working 18 to 20-hour days. I'm starting to kill this onion. I'm starting to eliminate layers. Too tall, too short, wrong race candidates. He already had a name. He had a name in 2007. So, at this point, my head is starting to explode. So what does he say in 2022? We have now discovered physical evidence, and he says this name, Marvin Merrill, is buried in the Z13 code. Okay, I'm going to talk about Marvin Merrill and Marvin Margolis in a little bit. What does he say? We have now discovered physical evidence in the Black Dahlia case that actually identifies the murder of Elizabeth Short and the Zodiac, tying into Circleville and into Atlanta. Okay, I'm running out of breath. I could go on and on, but the point is this. Everybody got played, okay? Chris Goffard of the Los Angeles Times, he got played by this guy. Michael Connelly got played by this guy. Rick Jackson, retired head of cold case unit at the LAPD, he got played. Mitzi Roberts, former custodian of the Black Dahlia, she got played. All these people got played by this guy. That's that simple. He took them all. They all fell for it. Now, the way it worked, as far as I can tell in reconstructing how they all got taken, was Babber contacted Rick Jackson. And Rick Jackson thought, well, his decoding method looked interesting. And then I guess he and Mitzi Roberts talked to Connelly, and Connelly said, great. Now, I knew Connelly had been working. Connelly was talking about another podcast, and he was talking about doing it on the Black Dahlia because it hasn't been solved. Now, despite the blurb allegedly from Michael Connelly on Steve Hodell's website that he considers the case closed, Michael really doesn't consider the case closed, apparently. So, if you know anything about the podcast industry, you know that it takes a long time. Mike's got this podcast out. That takes time to pull together. You don't throw that, you don't do that together. So Michael Connelly, Rick Jackson goes to Mike Connelly. Mike Connelly says, great. They do the podcast, which is airing now. And I'm not going to listen to it because I have no more need for my head to explode. Yeah. And the same thing with Chris Goffard. They talked to me, but they didn't. Nobody really, and that's a great point. Nobody really investigated this amateur amateur code breaker who actually, gee whiz AI, no, he had this database and he sat in his TV recliner and got Zodiac's name back in 2007. And I'm probably leaving some stuff out because what Babber's, and when you listen to him, he's like a popcorn machine of just shooting stuff out. But when you really sit down and listen, and somebody who watched this said, what did I just watch? Because he links all of these cases together. Black Dahlia, Zodiac, Atlanta child murders, lipstick murders, Circleville, all of that. It's all one. It's either one guy or two guys who got together and did murder, and then they went their separate ways, and they got together and did murder, and they, it's like, yeah. Ed Edwards, yeah. So that's, they got played, and so let's transition now to who got played and how they got played. Mike Connelly. Mike was a good reporter. There's no question about it. Mike's a nice enough guy. I ticked off Mike by criticizing his book The Waiting, where he talks about the Black Dahlia case. And I said, Mike, why do you call it the Black Dahlia case and just make up all this nonsense? Because if you're going to call it the Black Dahlia case, there ought to be some kind of expectation that it's close to being factual. And I guess Mike's feelings got hurt about that because Mike's a best-selling writer and he's not used to being criticized. Oh, dear. Anyway, Mike is a good enough writer that he could have fixed that problem in half. He could have called it the Purple Petunia, and it would have been like the Black Dahlia. It wouldn't have been the exact murder of Elizabeth Short, but it would have been like that, and people would have accepted it. It would have been fine. But to call it the Black Dahlia case and then make up all this stuff is just bogus. So that's, Mike was a fine reporter, no question about it. But Mike's reporting days were a long time behind him. They were a long time ago. Mike is, Mike's an entertainer. He's good at it. I don't begrudge him that. He's written a lot of novels. He's got TV shows. Great. But I think being in the entertainment world as long as Mike has been, being in fiction for so long, maybe has dulled his reporter's instincts a little bit, maybe. Rick Jackson got played. It's that simple. Now, Mitzi Roberts and Chris Goffard says she's intimately familiar with the Black Dahlia case. No, she's not. No. And I was shocked. Frankly, when I saw some of the quotes, or one of the quotes attributed to Mitzi Roberts, I was like, oh, wow, she doesn't know the first thing about the Black Dahlia case. And that was kind of stunning. My reaction is, I am really glad that neither of them have badges and aren't arresting people anymore, because if that indicates the kind of detective work that they're doing, it's not good. They are, they're entertainers. They are crime personalities like Connelly, Rick and Mitzi. Connelly's got a character based on Mitzi. What do you think her loyalty is going to be? What do you think they're going to say? So they got played. And what I want to say specifically about Elizabeth Short is the thing that really is at the crux of all of this, in a way. Nobody knows where Elizabeth Short was from the time Red Manley left her at the Biltmore on January 9th until her body was found on January 15th. They don't know. And what I was getting pushback from Chris Goffard about was sloppy police work, is they didn't check the timeline. Yes, they did. The police erred in this. Supposedly, you will read that there was a policewoman who had an interaction with Elizabeth Short in the bus station, and it is frequently repeated. This policewoman, Merle McBride. Well, what no one tells you, because it doesn't fit their theory, is that that identification was based on a verbal description of Elizabeth Short. Okay. When, and this is in the Los Angeles Daily News, and I believe it's in the Los Angeles Times. I'm not just pulling it out of my nose. You can actually go to the Daily News and find it. They showed policewoman McBride, who told this story about her encounter with Elizabeth Short. They got Elizabeth Short's mugshot from when she'd been arrested in Santa Barbara. And they said, okay, here's the photograph of Elizabeth Short. Is this the woman? Her response, she wasn't so sure. Yeah, she wasn't so sure. Now, I saw on Reddit, I know Reddit, right? Well, they took policewoman McBride to the morgue and showed her the body of Elizabeth Short. After she's all cut up, after her cheeks are slashed like that, her lip is slashed, she's been banged in the head, her throat's cut open and stitched up. Either she's stitched up or her jaw is hanging open. And policewoman McBride identified her in the morgue. Baloney. Baloney. That's absolute nonsense. So no. And I was really shocked that Mitzi said that, because that's like Black Dahlia 101. Okay. So they got played, and the Los Angeles Times got played big time. They all got played by this guy. So now, if you're still around, we're going to talk about his yeah. And that's the thing. I will say again, the Black Dahlia case was a state-of-the-art investigation for 1947. These guys aren't around to defend themselves, but I am. And I will tell you right now, they spent a ton of effort and time on that. These guys were good, sharp detectives. They were, especially Harry Hansen and Finest Brown, especially Harry Hansen. They'd been at it a long time. They didn't screw anything up. And Jack Donahoe, they never figured out where Elizabeth Short was. And I can tell you, based on information that I have, that Elizabeth Short was never knocking around at Liberty in Los Angeles in that missing 6-day period. There were a lot of sightings reported in the newspapers. People saw her all over the place. You know, they saw her at the cab stand. They saw her in San Diego. They thought they saw her on the streetcar. Those were all checked out. I mean, really, do you think the police didn't read the newspapers? Oh, no. They don't know where she was. They absolutely don't know where Elizabeth Short was. And anybody who tells you that they know where Elizabeth Short was in that missing 6 days, they're full of it. They don't know. Absolutely. And it's one of the things you have to accept about the Black Dahlia case, is that we don't know where she was. That's one of them. Okay. Let's talk about code breaking for a minute and how these NSA guys signed off on Mr. Babber's. Oh, no, wait a minute. Marvin Margolis. Sorry, I got to do Marvin Margolis. Who is poor old Marvin Margolis? Marvin Margolis is, and this is one of the things, he went into the Navy. He was a hospital apprentice 1. Okay. And the argument for Marvin Margolis is, oh, well, he did battlefield surgery in Okinawa and stuff like that. No. What you needed as a prerequisite to be a hospital apprentice 1 is a Red Cross first aid instruction. That's all you needed. First aid. Okay. The hospital apprentice first class, which is what his rating was, and that too is online. That is on Ancestry. I'm not making up any of this stuff. He was a hospital assistant 1, first class. And so what he would do in combat is he would go out there. He's the Navy, but they work in conjunction with the Marines. And don't ever tell the Navy that they're the Marines, and don't ever tell the Marines that they're the Navy, or I will come visit you in the hospital. Those are 2 separate branches of the service, and they work together, but those are 2 different branches, and you don't ever confuse the 2 of them. No, don't do that. Anyway, what typically in combat these Navy hospital apprentices would do, well, they would work in the hospital and stuff like that. but they would go out if they would go out on the battlefield. They would put sulfa on wounds. Okay, sulfa powder on wounds. They would put bandages if the guy was bleeding. They would try to stop the bleeding. They might do, an IV bag, intravenous bag with plasma, something like that to keep. That's what they did. It was strictly battlefield conditions. They were not certainly not going to do any surgery. No. That was way beyond him. So that's the first thing. He has a harrowing story to tell, no question about it. And I'm very happy with this. The idea is that the claim was that he was a pre-med student at USC, and that as a pre-med student, he would have dissected human beings. No. I happen to have right here the USC catalog from 1947-48. Okay. You want to know what pre-med students took? I will tell you. First year pre-med students: chemistry, English, French or German, general studies, physical education, and electives. Second semester: chemistry, English, French or German, general studies, PE, physical education. Second year pre-med: chemistry, French or German, general studies, physical education, zoology, fine arts or music, French or German, general studies, more general studies, PE, zoology. Okay? And mathematics was recommended as an elective. Third year: chemistry, English, physics, zoology. Chemistry, English, physics, zoology. Those were the requirements for pre-med. And there was some other stuff, but they weren't doing human dissection. The cadaver lab is a rite of passage for first-year medical students. That's it. You don't get to do that until you're in medical school. Pre-med doesn't do that. And let me point out, because we're going to talk about UBOC. There's a letter from the University of, I think it's Champaign-Urbana, or Urbana-Champaign, or whatever they call themselves now, that Margolis flunked his courses because he went into the service. So he would have had to repeat, biology and zoology and stuff like that. So no, he didn't have it. That is utter bullshit that he was dissecting human bodies. No. Now the theory, and how the code breaking gets into this, which is hilarious, is that Bill Robinson was a crypto guy, maybe a cryptanalyst, something like that. And so what do two 20-something-year-old war veterans do in Hollywood? Okay, post-war. You want to go out tonight? No, let's do columnar transposition. Sure, that's what they did. Okay, let me point out something just to establish my credentials. I love word puzzles. I do them all the time. Here is my copy of David Kahn's The Codebreakers. I have been doing cryptograms since I was in high school. I love cryptograms. I found a copy of this book in the library. I read the first chapter, which is how they broke the purple code. And I said, I want to do that. So I did. I had, the NSA had a test. The first step in getting hired by the NSA is to take a test. And at that point, it was administered by the Educational Testing Service. So I took the test. I did pretty good on it. I had a job interview at the University of Arizona with NSA. I looked like a pretty good candidate. They flew me back to Fort Meade. I have been in Fort Meade. I've had a job interview at Fort Meade. More important, I had a polygraph test at Fort Meade, which was not fun. But I had job interviews at Fort Meade. I ended up not getting hired. That was fine. It worked out well for me. But when you start talking about code breaking, you're speaking my language. In fact, this is a journal called Cryptologia, a quarterly journal devoted to cryptology. Okay. And on page 325, there's an article called Cryptograms from the Crypt. The byline is Jim Galogly. And who's this? Why, it's me. I have an article in Cryptologia. Now I have to be honest, and it was a great story. A guy named Thulis left a coded message that he would provide the key for after he died to see if there was life after death. He would provide the keyword to decode this message. Okay, nobody could solve it, and so Jim at Rand Corporation, he solved it using a computer. All I did was the lead work, and he put my name on it as a courtesy. I didn't do any of that. That would be way, way, way beyond me. And if you want to know what it was a double enciphered playfair with the keyword Black Beauty. But I know about columnar transposition. I know about generating keywords. You can't bullshit me on this stuff. And I will put the link in the description. There's a collab assessment of Alex Babber's so-called method. And when I started reading it, it's like, well, that's not how keywords work. That's not how it works. That's not how you do a keyword, you know? And if you didn't know anything about codes and ciphers, you know, you might think, well, there's something to it. But here's the acid test. Rather than try to duplicate the decoding method, I should be able to take the name Marvin Merrill. And let me point out, regardless of what Babber says about artificial intelligence and examining census records, Marvin Margolis went by Marvin Merrill later in his life, yes. But in the 1950 census, he was still Marvin Margolis. No, he wasn't Marvin. Even more, and I know this will be shocking, untruths from Mr. Alex Babber, who is turning out to be a not very trustworthy individual. Okay, so rather than try to duplicate the decryption method that they came up with to make it work, I went the other way. I am going to take the plain text Marvin Merrill and put it into a grid and then try to generate Zodiac's message from that. Because if that's really how Zodiac works, if that's how it works, I should be able to do that. And the short answer is no, that doesn't work. The method absolutely does not work. It's absolute junk. So no, I don't care what the NSA guys' credentials are. Their method is junk. They have, and I don't want to get into it. I mean, for a lay audience, but it's like, oh, come on. And I will point out this because it's important. It ties into the, you know, Marvin Margolis or Marvin Merrill or whatever. He did this drawing and he, you know, this nude woman, well, her hair is hanging down so you can't see anything, but it's labeled Elizabeth. And let me point out, Elizabeth is one of the most common women's names in America. You go to the Census Bureau. Okay, what is it? One of the like top 10 or 20 women's names in the 1920s when Elizabeth Short was born. Elizabeth. Okay. You go now. Elizabeth is a very popular name. Lots and lots and lots of women were named Elizabeth. That by itself is no big deal. It could have been a drawing of Elizabeth Taylor. Who knows? But Elizabeth, we know the Black Dahlia as Elizabeth Short. Yes, we do. She didn't use that name. She didn't go by Elizabeth. In fact, when some of her friends read the story about her, they didn't realize it was her because they didn't know her as Elizabeth. When she was living in Los Angeles in 1946, Elizabeth Short was going by either Betty or Beth, not Elizabeth. No, nobody knew her as Elizabeth. So the whole idea that she was using Elizabeth no, I mean, the level of ignorance is just absolutely staggering. And some of it has to be willful ignorance. They just don't know that. And let me point out, because one of the things is, yeah, Marvin Margolis was the jealous boyfriend that this policewoman encounter. She had a jealous boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, first of all, it wasn't Elizabeth Short, so we can throw that in the trash. But even, but here's the thing. Here's the thing that nobody tells you, because it knocks the hell out of their theory won't work. Their scenario won't work. And so they won't tell you. Marvin Margolis got married in November 1946. I think it was November 26th. So when Elizabeth Short was killed, he was a newlywed. Okay. No jealous boyfriend. He was done with her. He'd married somebody else. And again, Elizabeth Short was missing for 6 days. What would Marvin Margolis tell his wife? Honey, here's Elizabeth Short. I got to, lock her up in the spare bedroom for a week. Come on. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, the whole thing is just garbage from front to back. Anyway, we're running out of time. I haven't gotten a chance to do any questions. I will tell you this. I have a way to save the chat. I will save the chat and I will address I will put them in the next Ask Me Anything. Okay. Final thoughts are this. As we have seen in the last hour of me ranting and raving, true crime is a sleazy genre. That's why I don't do interviews anymore. I don't want anything to do with it. It is a genre where you can say absolutely anything and come up with absolute garbage theories, and you'll get traction in the Los Angeles Times when the stuff is easily disproved. And as I told Chris Goffard, you are wasting your time on Marvin Margolis. And indeed, I told him, I resent wasting my time on Marvin Margolis. Well, guess what? I resent wasting my time on Marvin Margolis. But here we are. Okay. Final thoughts. The anniversary of Elizabeth Short's murder is coming up January 15th. Find a respectful way to honor it. I always make a charitable contribution in her name. I give it to Heading Home, which works with homeless and victims of domestic violence in the Boston area, because she was from there. But really, do something like that. And the other thing is Black Dahlia Book Club. I have changed because I'm sick of, yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was married. It's bullshit. I'm sick of talking about Steve Hodel. He tells his one joke, the same thing. He says the same thing. And so while I'm going to talk about, Steve Hodel, I'm going to expand that. And so Black Dahlia Book Club starts the third Tuesday of the month, which is the January 20th. And the first thing I'm going to discuss is the True Detective article from October 1948. That'll be the first treatment, because it's not the first magazine article, but it is one of the most historic magazine's articles. And I will put that on, like archive.org. Because I have a scan of that. And so I will put that up on the internet so people can read it. Okay. If you want to read it ahead of time, with the warning that you can't take pulp magazines like gospel. They're going to be problematic. Okay. So I will save all your wonderful questions. Thank you very much for coming. I can pop out the chat. I will save all the comments, and I will address them next time. And I have a whole bunch of submitted questions. I didn't get to any of them. Apologies. And we will do that on, February. Let's see. February 3rd, 2026. First Tuesday in February. I will get to them. And remember, just be careful of these wild claims. And I will see you if you come back for Black Dahlia Book Club. I'll see you on, what did I say, the 20th. Otherwise, it'll be February 3rd. And thank you. And my silent partner, Boxy, thanks you also. Okay. Thanks again. And we'll talk to you later. Say goodbye, Boxy.